So when the Prime Minister says those attempting to enter illegally will be sent back, to pinch a phrase that John Reid coined about the Home Office all those years ago, is that a threat not fit for purpose?
Well, it's a threat that can't be delivered. The 40,000 numbers show that. I mean, there's a lot of the asylum applicants who come across the channel. A lot of them are Iranian, for example. We have next to no ability to remove from the UK any Iranian back to the country, irrespective of whether for whatever purpose they're here. So those who claim asylum, their asylum claim is refused. We can't remove them back to the country. None of them will have travel documents. None of them have passports. And the Iranian embassy will not issue duplicate passports to nationals from their country. In effect, very few are issued, so you can't remove them from the country. So the Prime Minister can say these things, but the reality of the ability to achieve that is very, very low. And the only way to deal with the Channel problem is really return them in the Channel back to France if they're intercepted in the Channel, which is a safe country after all. They're not coming from an unsafe country when they come from France.
Is there a secondary problem that the men and women working in your old department and more generally at the Home Office take a slightly more loving, caring, cuddly view than perhaps Theresa May did in her day or Boris Johnson in his day? The will is not there amongst the civil servants to do this because they're saying, these poor souls face horrors at home. Let's just turn a blind eye to it.
I truly don't believe that's the case. The officials in the Home Office will take the lead from the politicians, of course, and Windrush has caused a political tremor in the Home Office, so I'm sure that has had an impact in the appetite for...
How do you mean a political tremor?
Well, it's just the extent that it caused political turbulence. The Home Secretary lost her role. It's made, I suspect, politically, it's become more political, the enforced removal of immigrants from the UK because of the errors that were made in respect of Windrush. So I suspect that would have caused political anxiety, and which would be translated down into the approach by officials, undoubtedly. So that would have some impact. But I think generally it's about resources. I mean, the detention estate now is far lower in the numbers it can detain because they've closed quite a few immigration removal centres. The only way to enforce the removal of someone from the UK is to detain them first. So if you haven't got detention space, you can't do that.
And will your successor be eyeballing Priti Patel, the new Home Secretary, and indeed Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, given half a chance, saying you can make all the threats you want, but unless you give us X, Y and Z, we simply can't deliver?
Yes, and I'm sure my successor will be giving genuine and proper advice to the Home Secretary. And in fairness, it's not just about X, Y and Z. I mean, because, as I say, there are some countries and individuals from some countries when they haven't got a travel document where you just, whatever resources you had, you can't effect their removal from the UK.
Does that imply then that there is, as it were, a number? I mean, it's difficult to quantify, obviously, but you mentioned certain countries, whether it's Libya or Iran or what have you, that there's a kind of number that of folk, if they do manage to get here across Europe and then the rigours of crossing the Channel and what have you, that once they are here, then it's a fait accompli, that there's basically nothing that our system can do about it.
Absolutely correct. That is correct, yes.
The potential for uproar amongst folk listening to that, and you're a very balanced and experienced man, but the potential for uproar is great.
People will take their own views about that. So there are individuals who will get here irrespective of... So once they're on British soil, they will remain here, irrespective of what occurs, and there are many in that category. There are others, if there were more resources, more effort put into it, could be removed from the UK and currently aren't being. And there's the legal system, what used to be called Detain Fast Track, which was very successful in removing asylum seekers. So asylum seekers who came from a safe country, believe it or not, you get people travel from Portugal, Spain, Italy and claim asylum in the UK. They are applications that are bound to fail because they're safe countries they come from. So there used to be a system where you could detain those individuals because they could be certified as an unvalid claim. They could appeal against that to the courts. The courts all did this very fast, and within 10 weeks the person was removed from the UK. And these are people you could get travel documents for. The courts ruled that unlawful because the Home Office spread it to too wide a remit of individuals. But the courts did leave a gap to recreate that in a reformed way, and that hasn't been recreated. Again, that takes resources, it takes detention space, but the low numbers of asylum seekers being removed now, part of that is due to that change in approach.
But didn't want to butt in because that it was complicated and bringing me up to date on something. I mean, surely if they come from Portugal, until such time as we leave the EU, then free mobility of labour means they can come here anyway. Well, I don't understand the problem with someone who's coming from the EU up until the point where we actually leave.
Yes, they've normally got some other nationality background.
Right, gotcha.
So they won't be Portuguese by birth, probably, in those situations.
Right, okay. The reason I wanted to ask you that as well is because in the context of Brexit, we always get these arguments about, oh, well, you know, you didn't know what you were voting for, and people get very cross when they're accused of that. All of the polling data shows with crystal clarity that one of the issues that did concern the majority of people who voted to leave was open borders, free mobility. Now, that only applies to the other European Union countries. It doesn't apply anyway to all of these other countries. But yeah, immigration and the free movement of people around the world, let alone across Europe, is not on the back burner. That is front and four square in people's minds. If we can't find a way of dealing with this, take you back to the point I made earlier, the potential for disquiet is very serious.
Yes, well, I mean, it is a serious point because as we leave the EU, of course, the Europeans then will become the same as the rest of the world. Now, I'm sure there'll be visa-free travel for visitors from Europe to the UK and presumably from the UK to countries in Europe. But people coming here to work, people coming here to study, there'll probably be a light touch visa regime. There will be individuals from Europe who currently, as you just said a few minutes ago, totally entitled to come here and do those things, who won't be able to in the future without authority, and will only be able to come as a visitor for up to 6 months.
Sure.
So there will be a lot of those going to the illegality and need resources to deal with.
As with the example you gave a moment ago about Portugal, someone coming from Portugal, was okay. Final point, we've got about a minute and a half left, David. Final point is this, that you and I will know, and many other folk who've followed it in the papers, that since the decision was taken for the UK to leave the European Union, actually the numbers of people coming here from the European Union has declined very, very sharply. But annually, there is still round about 200,000 people who are still coming to this country. So if and when we leave the European Union on the 31st of October or before, there is still going to be the best part of 250,000 people, most of whom doing it quite legally, are still going to be coming to this country.
Yeah, if I could just correct the figures.
Yeah.
The 200,000 you quote, etc., is 200,000 more coming than leave the UK.
Sorry, quite right. Sorry, I do beg your pardon. Net figure, so it might be 500 coming here, 500,000, but 300,000 of us going to Spain or wherever it might be. Yeah. So the net figure is around about £250,000 people a year.
And that's correct. And whereas it used to be 50-50, with about half of them European and half of them non-European, last year it was 60,000. So last year, I think it was 59,000 more Europeans come here than left. So there's still more Europeans are coming here than are leaving the UK. But that number that number was less than had been in previous years. That's correct. So yes, there will be, after we leave the European Union, there still will be 200,000 plus more net migration into the UK, probably. It's not going to have an enormous impact.
All right. Final question, David. Of that 40,000 failed asylum seekers still in the UK, that was the headline that got us having this conversation in the first place, what proportion of 40,000 do you reckon instinctively there is absolutely nothing we can do anything about?
I would suggest around half, or just over half.
20,000 people.
Probably, yes.
Extraordinary. Food for thought. David Wood, always good to talk to you. Thank you so much for finding time to talk to us this morning here on Talk Radio. That's David Wood, the former Director General of Immigration Enforcement at the Home Office, basically saying the numbers coming from Europe are declining anyway. The net numbers, we leave, they come, is around about 200,000. But of the 40,000 failed asylum seekers who have no entitlement to be here at all, around about 20,000 is the number about whom we can do absolutely nothing. Extraordinary fact there from David Wood, former Director General of Immigration Enforcement at the Home Office.